All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment over the course of these negotiations, we're being joined by Professor James Russell, who's an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS from Monterey in the United States, and he's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Professor Russell, we're hearing a lot about these negotiations that are taking place of a potential ceasefire deal. We've been hearing about these negotiations that have been ongoing for so long. Now, why do you think there has been no deal that has been reached for a ceasefire and for the exchange of hostages and prisoners in the Gaza Strip for the last several months?
Well, my answer to that is simple, is that the incentives in place for the participants to conclude such a deal simply don't exist. Israel has been conducting a genocidal war of ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians. It sees no reason to try to stop this campaign. Their objective is to drive the Palestinians off the Gaza Strip and colonize it. They also seek to widen the regional war by their provocations against Iran. And what they really seek, of course, is to draw in the United States. So for Israelis, they have every incentive to want to try to continue the war. And for Hamas, it's actually curiously somewhat similar in that the reason, I think, for the attack on Israel back in October was to widen the war, so to speak, to draw international attention to the plight of the Palestinians, which has happened, of course, at great cost to the Palestinians. And so they look at the prospect of a wider regional war as something that might help their cause, right? They have been seeking, the Palestinians have been seeking for many, many years outside support for their political objectives of creating a Palestinian state. They would, I think, rather have achieved this peacefully, but the Israelis have taken that off the table. So both sides, the incentives, the only actor in this situation for restraint is the United States, and Biden has been completely and utterly ineffective throughout this crisis, and I see no reason to believe he suddenly is willing to use the leverage at his disposal.
You know, I think that's an important point that you make, because if there is any country that has any kind of leverage on what is happening at this moment in the Gaza Strip, it would be the United States of America. And what is interesting is that on Thursday, just before this round of negotiations began in Doha, we got reports that the United States of America has approved another $20 billion of weapons for the state of Israel just before the negotiations were to start in Doha. What do you think has been the American role in these negotiations and also in the course of this war?
The American role in the war is simple and straightforward. We have enabled politically, militarily, and economically the Israeli slaughter of innocent Palestinians. America has blood on its hands. I see no reason why the International Court of Justice isn't pursuing President Biden and his administration as war criminals for what we are doing. I know that's seen as a rather extreme view, but it's the truth. And as an American, it pains me to say this, right? And it's so the question you have to ask yourself is, well, why is the United States acting like this? And I think the reality is it's the power of the Israeli lobby and the intrusion of big money, donor money into American politics. You have to understand that as throughout this wartime crisis, the United States and President Biden in particular and the Democratic Party have been receiving millions of dollars from rich donors, pro-Israeli donors across the political spectrum. And they're terrified of angering the donors. And again, this is not a positive reflection on American democracy in any way, shape, or form. It's the intrusion of big money influencing political decisions. This war is not in American interests. I can tell you that. And I wish we had an American president in place who was representing American interests.
I think you've summed it up beautifully there. Thank you very much indeed, Professor James Russell, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you very much.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.